Germany's new chancellor has vowed to build the strongest army in Europe.
Germany is nervous.
More troops, more equipment, more rapid deployment.
This year's defense budget of Germany exceeds $100 billion, the largest NATO budget excluding the United States. This came after years of low spending, and it stands at just over 2% of their GDP. But their target is to reach 3.5% before the end of the decade. Germany's posture in Europe is swiftly changing. After World War II, they developed a unique strategy for peace, which was based on the idea that if you create economic ties with your adversaries, it would lead to peace, because it would become too costly for either side to start a war. In the 20th century, they built the pipelines that connected the Soviet Union to Western Europe, which laid the foundation for Europe's dependency on Russian gas today. And when relations with Russia soured, guess what Germany did? They increased Russian gas imports. This peak in 2017 followed the invasion of Crimea, but even Germany is coming to terms that economic ties aren't sufficient. They made the historic decision to cut all direct gas imports, and they're now letting go of their historic military restraint. They want to command the greatest army on the continent, but is this a better strategy for peace? Or is it a provocation towards Russia? This is Germany's military comeback with hindsight.
Die Bundesregierung wird zukünftig alle finanziellen Mittel zur Verfügung stellen, die die Bundeswehr braucht, um konventionell zur stärksten Armee Europas zu werden.
Germany's military was once feared for its ruthless technological efficiency, but it has become a bit of a joke. But their new chancellor is showing a different posture.
Deutschland ist zurück. Deutschland leistet seinen großen Beitrag zur Verteidigung der Freiheit und des Friedens in Europa.
More room to shape its own policies, but they had NATO troops on its soil. The agreement was that neither East nor West Germany would pick up arms, but that wouldn't last. The Cold War was starting with Germany at its center. The Soviet Union started training an army in East Germany that stood under tight control of Moscow. And in West Germany, a few years later, they created the Bundeswehr. The number of military personnel increased sharply in the 1960s and stood at just below 500,000 for the duration of the Cold War. Their army was never designed to operate independently. It stood under NATO command, and it was huge. In 1970, they had 495,000 military personnel in peacetime, but they could have access to 1.3 million reservists in times of war. This was the largest army in Europe, far ahead of the British and French. And in addition, West Germany was packed with foreign troops. The border with East Germany was divided into defense sectors, and each NATO member was assigned its own combat sector. This was called NATO's forward strategy, and it made the border between East and West Germany the front line of the Cold War. But diplomatically, West Germany had a very different posture, especially from the 1970s and onwards. Chancellor Willy Brandt wanted to normalize relations with Eastern Europe in a strategy called Ostpolitik, Eastern policy. He encouraged talks over confrontation and to strive for peace by doing business. Wandel durch Handel, change through trade, became the new emblem. This was welcomed to some extent in the Soviet Union. They had discovered vast fields of natural gas, and they were hoping to sell this to countries in Western Europe. Germany had the technology, the Russians had the gas, and so they made a deal. Pipes for gas is how the media picked it up. Germany provided the pipes for building a pipeline crossing Ukraine and Czechoslovakia to reach Germany. For this work, they were paid with gas, and this deal laid the foundation for Russian gas exports to Western Europe. Willy Brandt created the political atmosphere to make such a deal possible. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1971, and the pipes for gas deal started Europe's long-term reliance on Russian gas. In the 1990s and the early 2000s, other pipelines were built through Belarus and the Baltic Sea, which reduced the importance of this infrastructure to Ukraine. This worried Central European countries, as well as the United States. Russian gas imports reached an all-time high right after Russia's invasion of Crimea, and when they invaded Ukraine, they were at a near-historic high. It became clear that this economic relationship wasn't sufficient to dissuade Russia from pursuing military action, and some started to doubt whether the underlying philosophy was perhaps correct. Germany had a similar stance with China. Since 2016, China had become Germany's largest trading partner, overtaking the US after decades of being in the top spot. It's very different from Russian gas, but it's similar in that it follows the same underlying post-war philosophy that trade can lead to peace.
For decades, Europe's sleeping giant stayed silent. Germany, a nation with the continent's largest economy, but a military so underpowered it became a running joke inside NATO. The world had gotten used to this. Germany's strength was economic, not military. And after the horrors of World War II, that seemed intentional, or maybe even permanent. But in 2022, everything changed. When Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, something cracked in Berlin. Germany declared a Zeitenwende, a turning point in history. A pledge to rebuild its armed forces, not as a supporting player, but as the dominant military power in Europe. And the scale of this transformation is staggering. With the largest military investment in Europe since the Cold War, we're talking €500 billion committed to ammunition, stealth jets that will carry NATO's nuclear mission, and AI-driven drones that hunt and strike without hesitation. This is the transformation of Germany from deciding whether to rise to a continent preparing for the moment it does. So if Germany is truly preparing to lead Europe's defense, what does that mean for NATO, Russia, and the balance of power on the continent? And if Germany becomes the continent's military superpower, will the rest of Europe feel safer or more uneasy? The cornerstone of Germany's military rise lies in one thing: money, and more of it than Europe has seen in decades. In 2025, Germany's defense budget stands at €95 billion. But by 2029, that number will rise to €162 billion. That's an increase of almost 70% in just 4 years, the steepest military investment surge modern Europe has ever seen. And this is not just about yearly budgets creeping higher. This trajectory will push German defense spending to 3.5% of GDP by 2029. For context, NATO's benchmark target is just 2%. Most allies struggle to reach that. Germany is now set to go far beyond it, placing itself among the very top military spenders on Earth. But how is Berlin making this leap when Germany's politics have traditionally tied defense spending in knots? The answer lies in a new financial framework designed for rearmament. At its core is a €500 billion infrastructure fund, €500 billion dedicated to rebuilding the German armed forces. This fund is locked in, immune to the usual political back and forth. Even more significant, Germany has